Probably.
That whole area.
So what's the calling is CPR management, then Eagle Maine, and then separately a this phone, right?
Yeah,
Then we pay Brianna, right?
oh, yes.
Then what North Coast services are
Yeah. What's that? So a lot of the times batteries and those kind of items go to that company. Eco Maine, trash and recycling, and then the CBRC, things like mattresses and things like that, go to that.
So those all ways for the acceptance company?
Yes.
And then, the other one was.
Mission Square, that.
The name of the company.
Yeah, it used to be CMA and they just switched to being called Mission Square.
And then Matheson tried gassing.
Geez, so
It's like $800.
Public Works equipment.
Matheson.
Yeah.
I think the description, he just put the wrong description and it's usually,
Matheson supplies stuff like acetylene, welding supplies.
it's honestly deflated, it's something with equipment maintenance in relation to public works. You can, it's just under the description, it just needs to be changed, it's the accountant.
Actually, you should have, it should be in the receipt.
Oh, but the bill.
Ready?
Yeah, it just took forever.
All right, welcome everybody to Wednesday, May 17, 2023 meeting. It is 6:03. Like to open the floor for public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion, not action. Yeah.
The only thing which is gonna be mentioned later, but there's nothing to result in my property or anything like that. My only public comment that I have is the way that the code of the Selectmen guy is being treated as well as me. I feel bad for him. As a town, you guys should probably reflect on yourselves as this. This has been an ongoing problem since 2007, so 16 years, that you guys have not enforced these rules for the masses. And now we're gonna pick and choose who we're gonna enforce them on. And then also throw the guy that kind of just fell into the way things were brought on, should be a guy and kind of went with them, be treated and talked about through a town the way that he is. I just feel completely and utterly wrong. And that's just me as a taxpayer. I don't care about my situation at all. That will all iron itself out, man. But I think as a town, the direction where we're heading isn't in the right direction as a town of Shabik that I remember when I first came here. There was a lot of respect for your neighbor, a lot of respect for your fellow community. And I think we've lost sight of that somewhere along the lines. This isn't the Shabik that I remember when I came here. It's definitely changing. If that's the direction that we want to go, then that's the direction we gotta go. But we've got to do that direction for the masses, for everybody that's involved, not just the select few, because you're not from Shabik Island. You know, everybody has a right to come, start a family, do what they should be able to do on an island, and not be treated that way just because you're not from the island. And that's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Moving on to town reports. Send it off to the town administrator.
The first thing on the page report is the budget. In your packet was the attached, then updated budget report with the changes from what you discussed last week. At this point, the warrant needs to be signed, authorized and signed by you before the last day of May in order to be able to have it be available to the public for a number of days prior to the town meeting. And so we need to schedule a special selectmen's meeting sometime towards the end of next week, so then that way can be brought to your attention and signed. I guess to start out with, do you have any questions with the information that was on the budget? And then is there a day that works best for everybody to do that meeting?
Fine.
Will this just simply be a very quick command, make a motion to adopt the budget as presented for preparation for warrant articles for town meeting and then adjourn?
So what it is, it's gonna be the town making a motion, accepting and then signing it, and that official document will have to be present to the public for at least 10 days before the town meeting, which is June 10th.
So this is next week?
It's our only option at this point.
Okay,
Either next week or the following Monday, Tuesday.
So I spent the last 2.5 days working on the town warrant, and I put everything together. And the school was great, you know, I've got their warrant articles, so I compiled all of that. And I sent it to the attorney today. I have not heard back as far as, she did ask me previously that she would like a week notice to be able to go over it, but I didn't hear back from her about when the date would be. So I would think that, you know, within the next week, we will get it back from her.
so probably Wednesday for me.
Which is, what's the date on Wednesday?
24th. So the
Yeah, I can't do Thursday for sure.
Thursday is the Board of Adjustment Appeals hearing. Wednesday, it would work. The only thing is, it might put it in the crunch for when I get the warrant back from the attorney and send it directly to you. So, because that gives her, I sent it today, so.
Can we try for Monday, the 29th?
Memorial Day.
Holidays.
I could consider Tuesday next week.
You don't think you'll have?
I don't know.
Too close.
Yeah, I think that, you know, my recommendation would be if you want to schedule it for next Wednesday, do that, but then have a backup day of like Friday or even Wednesday, the 31st. That's like the last day that it could be approved and signed by you.
What about,
Because I think you also need some time to look at it too.
what about Saturday, the 27th? 9 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
I can't do that. I can't do Friday or Saturday, really.
Gotcha.
So why not Tuesday, the 30th?
Works for me. Mhm.
So we putting down the 24th, Wednesday, the 24th, and if it's not available, then we need an update.
I'm fine with that.
What's the absolute latest that you would want it forwarded to you? Like how many days do you want?
2 days.
So if it was received at some point through the weekend and I forward it to you on Monday or sometime on Monday, then that would work. And if it doesn't come Monday, then I would let you know, and then the meeting would get scheduled for then the 30th, you said, Tuesday the 30th?
Does that work for everybody?
So we're gonna tentatively try for next Wednesday, and if it doesn't work, the 30th.
And
Yep,
I'll
fine with
email
me.
Natalie tomorrow and let her know that that's our goal, to see if she can text today a little bit.
It's 6 o'clock both days.
Yeah.
And
Person,
no, unless you guys want to do it in person or Zoom. If we do it in person, we would just sign
Yeah,
paperwork and
fine.
get it done with, so instead of trying to coordinate.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Good.
That's just one more point / question. I saw Jackie the other day with Christine at my job site, and I talked with her a little bit about how it's going for her setting the total valuation of the town. And she said, quote unquote, I've added quite a bit in the last couple of 3 days.
She, at the end of the day on Tuesday, she said that she had about $22,000 worth of, taxes that she's increased for, some of these properties that she's gone and seen. So that will impact the, town valuation number will go up a little bit. So if anything, that would help the mill rate, not make it.
Yeah, I guess my point is, she said to me, I've added $1 million worth of value.
So $1 million worth of value, but it's how much that each, those properties are being taxed. And so the number
All
of
right.
that is being taxed is what
Yeah.
gets added to the valuation.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Were we talking about the budget now as part of the TA report?
If you had specific questions, I mean, what I put in, to my understanding was kind of the final numbers, but if you had certain things that you,
I do. On page 39, revenue, line 226 tax commitments, 2024 budget, so 3,225,695. And the 2023 budget was 3165. What percent increase is that?
1.9%.
2024 versus current budget. So does that equate to the mill rate increase?
That's just one of the equations that gets put into calculating the rate.
Do we have, there's not a sheet in here for the mill rate. Do we have the mill rate yet?
I thought that
She
was
sent
sent in the attachment. So when I sent you guys the email,
Oh.
I believe, was that in it?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that attachment should have been in it. That would have, provided the new.
12.63 or something.
Which would have been 12.69 is the estimate now.
What percent up is that?
It went from 12.5 to 12.69. I don't have the percent calculated.
12.9 is the new one. What was the old one?
12.5.
12.69. Could be in your email.
I didn't bring a calculator.
I'll
1.5% up.
knock down. Up, yeah.
1.5% up. Last time we talked, we were at 4%. I'm just wondering how we got there. Any ideas?
I took the information that you guys asked me to put in. I took and I put it in and. I mean, based on these calculations, the expense is going up by. 2.7%, but then when you add the revenue, the budget from last year to this year is, fairly just a little bit difference. And it's actually less when you add the revenues.
But yours is actually based on the updated warrant sheet. Ours was calculating on the fly, so I'm gonna go with yours, especially since it's 1.5%, not 4%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I may, the school added some good news on the revenue side to the tune of, I think, $40,000. $20,000. We decided to increase the ask of the taxpayers from the undesignated fund balance from 150,000 to 200,000.
Yeah.
And then we cut some of the numbers in the budget.
But we had all that in our last conversation.
Right, that's basically how we got to where this is right now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Moving on. Right.
The next thing is, the town's been working on or has received a couple of grants. One is the fire department applied for a grant. And they've received it to purchase year. And it's a grant that they can apply for every year. Now that they're aware of it, I think it's gonna become more of a common practice for them to do that for little things that could be here and there. And then the other grant is the coastal waters grant that was brought up to you at the last meeting. That you authorized coastal water to move ahead with. They just asked that a complete application be provided to you, which was in your packet, to see if you had any additional questions or comments or recommendations before they submitted. And Herb and Justin are here. If you,
I think the existing flow is 10 foot by 25 foot. And this is 10 by 24. So I assume the hookup will just be different when it,
Yeah, it's actually 10 by 24, it's 10.
oh, okay,
But the drawing does say by 24, but we just threw it in.
oh, gotcha,
But-
yeah,
So,
just the way they join the
so over
timbers.
the whole, it'll be 8 inches difference, but they can make up for that in the first floor.
Yeah.
And move forward.
Thank you.
Think you guys have future lighting, right?
Or-
Harold.
I thought, for the Silver Rise study, I thought that was a coastal community grant. I'm asking. I can check it myself, but you know, I mean, I don't know where this information came from.
I think we said we got a coastal.
You said 2009, but it was like 2016 or 15.
I mean,
it could have been, I tried going through all of the grants that I had and filing for
I
information,
can-
but I very well could have missed one.
And then, the other question was, no permits are needed for, I mean, so I don't know how it works. For a replacement float, you don't have to do any.
We had some information come in, your staff has been working, they've been very responsive, and since that went in the packet, there's been a few more pieces of information, including a letter from the CEO saying that we needed a, what was it?
So what's in here is not. What,
There are a few more things that came in after that, nothing, he said in his letter, he said that the permit was usually, yeah. There would be no problem with it.
but I mean, is it a DEP permit, is it a local
No, it's
permit?
local.
Does it need a working out permit? No.
No,
No,
Seems like it would need a. permit.
So if there is another grant,
But it won't hurt anything, you just should be accurate because
oh,
they might care.
yeah,
yeah,
I don't think anybody else cares. But I'm pretty sure the Sea Level Rise study was a community. Was a community grant. I can let you know.
Shoreline zone permit.
Oh, shoreline zone.
For table one, zoning ordinance.
to replace an existing flow, I think we might want to look into that.
So it says for table one in the town zoning ordinance number 17 states that temporary piers, docks, wharfs, bridges, and other structures and uses extending over or below the normal height, normal high water line, or with the wetland, a permit is needed from the code enforcement officer.
But you're
But
replacing.
replacement is not. Yeah. Well, we can revisit that.
right now, we can put this letter in the application, I don't think it will hurt the application to have that in there.
Yeah, but
But we'll figure out the accuracy of it.
I'm looking at item 17, it does not speak to replacement. Yeah, or nay. But it implies new construction, so it's worth having that conversation. Mark.
in your capital planning recommendation, you're recommending $13,000 be put in pretty much annually from here on out. Is that accurate?
That's what we figured based on those sort of back of the envelope calculations that could be refined. What Mark's talking about is there's three sections to this, is the application, there's supporting the application, and then there's a maintenance plan, which you'll see again. Quite often, I'm sure, throughout the course of the year, we're gonna be using that to work on, as a structure to capture all these great ideas that these guys have in these meetings. And he's talking about the capital plan summary paragraph that's in there where I've calculated all the square footage at 4,200 square feet of all 16 floats, $60 a foot, about $250,000. Spread that out over a 20-year lifespan, it's about $13,000 a year. So that's the extent of that calculation. We can define it as we go forward, but that's.
This year, we didn't contribute.
And if I may, along with that, I assume at some point we will do some sort of an evaluation of the existing units and decide whether we're going to, as we buy floats, fix them or put them out for bid and do away with them, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, the way we've defined it in there is that the application, it says we're constructing a float to replace the one with the ramp.
yeah,
We're gonna take that one out, rebuild it, use that in the next place, and at that point, assess whether that's a reasonable thing to keep doing.
yeah,
Where you practically rebuild. That one's gonna be in first shape. It'll be the highest cost, so it'll be a good.
Yeah.
A good test case.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Point. Right now, most of our existing floats do not have any skid timbers left underneath them that go underneath the float tub. So if we're going to be fixing any of those up, in my opinion, to keep and use, we should make sure that those skid timbers get replaced along with any tubs that may look like they're questionable.
Yeah, and that's, a lot of that is detailed.
Yeah.
In the maintenance plan, but obviously we need to assess each one and make sure. Exceeding the value, by the time we rebuild it, we may exceed the value of the new flow, so we'll have to keep each one.
And we may also, as a town and a community, have to decide how we're going to get this work accomplished, whether it's going to be in-house or not. Thank you.
Is granted due when tomorrow?
Good. Deadline Friday.
Friday.
So if there's no changes, we'll put it in pretty much with the addition of the new information, the letter and the language of your last motion, a few other things like that. That we'll have that tomorrow.
I'd just like to say thank you to Coastal Waters Commission and it was very thorough.
And I don't want to take the time now, but I certainly had other, in fact, I think we had several other community grants, so I'll just email you guys a list. All right, because the Collins study was, I think, a coastal community grant. Level Rise, and maybe even Sunset Hill. I'll double check when I have a minute.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on this? Based on the, once we get the grant dates, squared away, plus the code officer letter put in there, is there anything else I'm missing? There's something
I
else.
don't think there's anything else missing at this point.
Is it okay for the coastal waters to tell them this draft, right?
Yeah, you could definitely do that.
Yeah,
Submit it.
Yeah,
we did a motion last time for that.
You approved it
Yeah.
last meeting.
good.
This works, okay,
I should.
yeah, thank you very much. All right, moving
The
on.
last thing that I have on the TA report is my correspondence with Jim Fowler, so I've received an email from him. On the 12th, he had some, his sisters also came in to talk to me, and this is was due to follow up of the letter that he received. what I explained to him and, when I talked to his sisters is that, you know, once the communication has started from his end, it's an opportunity to bring it to the select board and the select board to decide how to move forward. And my recommendation would be, you know, to have 2 board members and sit down with Jim Fowler to see what the expectations are and, where, you know, consensus could be, maybe meet somewhere in the middle and then bring it back to him. So he's in the audience, so if you guys have any suggestions or recommendations about how to move forward. Well,
Carol,
Do we have the email? Did you send us the email? I didn't see it.
the email from Jim, no, I didn't forward it to you, no.
So can you send that? Or you can read it either way.
You want me to read it right now?
Well, I mean, whatever you,
Yeah, I can pull it up. So this was an email sent to Jim and I was CC'd on it. And it said, hi, it was nice to meet with you on Thursday, May 11th, Jim. I wish that the meeting that I requested in an email dated February 17th with the town administrator and selectmen was acknowledged and made time. As you did, and requested an immediate meeting with all again. I replied immediately to the violation I was sent on February 16th and to my knowledge, was asked, what was asked was also asking to meet for a meeting to confirm my compliance. I never received any further communication from anyone involved, so I assumed this issue is now over. Once again, blindsided with no communication, I received the violation clarification letter to be executed within a 14-day window. My intention with my property have been to barge some things off. The barge has just recently opened up and with storms in the town's jobs have set me back. I have been on this island since before becoming its hometown and have been on this land prior to my neighbor, never having any issues. As stated, I do exactly what the majority of this island does, which is park my belongings on my land, then go to other people's residents to work. To enforce these actions on me and willingly turn a blind eye on others is unethical. Look forward to hearing back from all of you.
you have a follow up on that, Carol, or?
well, I just, and did you respond to that?
Yes.
And what did you say? So we're in the loop here, because I don't think we have that.
Nope. What I responded and I said, that was the first time that I was being, that I had received communication from him. And that your sisters came in and spoke at length about this. They asked if they have the extension of 30 days. And I said that that would be okay, but also suggested that visible progress should be made to show that you're working cooperative with the town. I understand you and the CEO met, and I have no information about what was discussed, but as the town administrator, these are my suggestions and what I shared with your sisters. One is you reach out to me and show interest in working with the town to resolve this matter. 2, I will bring this to the board under communications and let them know that you and your family have been in contact. My recommendation as stated to the board is that board members, myself, code enforcer, and you and your family meet to discuss this matter and produce an agreement of what the next steps would be. The reason that I'm recommending this is I feel that it would be beneficial and helpful to start this conversation. This is common with selectmen's discussions. Once the town and you come to an agreement, they'll be brought to a board meeting for a discussion, a public meeting with all the selectmen present. If you are okay with what I mentioned, I'll bring this to the board and let them decide who the board members will be and will participate in this discussion, and we'll reach out to you the following Thursday. Let me know if you have any questions or alternative recommendation about how to get this moving.
And I guess if I can continue, my question is, why did you recommend only 2 board of selectmen when Jim requested the board?
And that's, you know, my recommendation would be to have the board and him, because it seems like that's with a lot of other discussions, that's kind of how things really progress and move. But if you want to do this with all 5 of you publicly at every meeting, then that's fine too. I mean, I'm not opposed to it one way or another. I just, there's a lot of other, whether it's with other properties or easements and things like that, it's common that there's 2 board members that are present. So there's more flexibility to meet, but.
Yeah, I think this is a little different in that it's a violation, not an easement discussion, so. But I guess for future reference, it'd be good to have the board in the loop about these communications when frankly the directive came from the board. So it would be, I think it's more productive to do that. Personally, I'd recommend the board meet with the Fowlers and their, whoever in the Fowler group wants to meet. That's my personal recommendation.
You can earlier use the phrase meet in the middle. What do you mean by that?
I'm sorry?
You used the phrase a little while ago, meet in the middle. Hopefully we could find a way to meet in the middle, something like that.
I guess meet in the middle is, coming to some conclusion and consensus of what the board expects and what the property owners are, I guess wrapping up and,
So there's a legal document, it is a letter, it's very clear, it states what has to be done. There's no negotiation from my viewpoint on that letter. The only negotiation would have to do with what changes can the town make in the future that would allow businesses like Jim, who we need to have out here, to function out here. But the letter is not negotiable. It's done. It has to be met in 14 days or 30 days if Jim requests an extension. There's no, from my viewpoint, there's no negotiation on that. It's black and white. Am I reading that correctly?
It's a violation that needs to be addressed. It's not a negotiation. Agreed. I mean, and it was the code enforcement officer who issued the violation.
Barb?
And again, without having previous experience of entering into any kind of a consent agreement, which I've struggled to figure out how that can be worked out, but I've had it explained to me by legal counsel at least once. So I now at least understand it. My concern about entering into consent agreements is the precedent that it is set, even short term. I think the bigger problem is the problem that the planning board is hopefully finally starting to help us all take a look at. And that is the present land use ordinances that we have in place, mostly that we probably carried over from Cumberland, appropriate, adequate, what we want, what we expect, what we can live with in this community on this island. So I don't know, I don't understand how a select board can meet with a code officer and the affected landowner and come up with a solution that takes it off the enforcement plate or ability to properly or improperly maybe enforce or keep land use ordinances enforced. I just don't understand it. It seems like if we have a select board group of 5 who hopefully right now and in the future are really well-intended, hardworking elected officials for this town, can move in and swoop it at any time and change a decision or a violation or a code violation. I just don't understand how that's an effective way to operate, but maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, in an earlier conversation relative to the planning board, I spoke with an attorney at length about the concept of precedent. And she made it very clear, precedent is highly overrated in the general understanding that it's not as binding as we might think it is. I think one way to think of it is if we decide to enter into a consent agreement with a party who's part of the community, that overrides part of an ordinance. We have the right to do that as a select board, under certain conditions, under advice from council, all that kind of stuff. If then someone else says, well, I would like to be part of that, they have to go through the same process. They have to enter into negotiations, they have to demonstrate need, all those kind of things. And then maybe it turns into 2 consent agreements. I think the value, okay, so first, the letter that was written and sent out by the code officer, those conditions in my mind are not negotiable. They are black and white. I do not want to negotiate them. But if there's a way for us to help, in this case, Mr. Fowler and his family and their businesses, figure out a way that they can operate that is as close to the ordinances as we can get until such time as the planning board is able to make the changes that they are working on now. We know now that's not going to happen by this town meeting. So the earliest it would happen would be a special town meeting sometime in the fall. So I think it's 2 separate things. One is the letter has to be met, and separately, we could have conversations about a consent agreement under advice from attorney, but I would also agree with Carol that it needs to be the entire board working on the issue in public, being very open about it. Mark?
That was well stated. Thank you, Bob. So I guess I'm kind of with Carol. If we feel that it's necessary / appropriate to go and meet at the Fowler property with the code officer and the town administrator and whoever else wants to show up, because it's going to be a public meeting. If we all go there, group of 5, that's the only way I'm going to be comfortable with it. Terrible.
And I think we should let the time frame of the notice of violation play out or expire before we take the next action as a board. And I don't remember what the date is. I'm not personally not opposed to it giving an extension if that's something they're asking for, but we're kind of jumping the gun here. And I think because we may as a town decide to impose fines, that's the next step. And you know, I think we need to follow the process that we put in motion, that the code enforcement officer actually put in motion. And the board asked him to clarify the criteria for how to comply. So I think that's where we are in my mind. And I agree with Bob, the criteria is not negotiable. It's the zoning ordinance.
Ben?
I feel like this is gone on for so long, and it's been back and forth and back and forth, and he said, she said, and yes, the community's, you know, talking about it and whatnot, but it all comes back to what we are trying to do with an ordinance that exists. It may not be perfect for this island, but it's what we have to work with presently. And this last letter that went out was very specific, as I felt the one before that. And if Mr. Fowler had questions regarding the letter or how it was worded, or with each time it's being sent, you know, I never heard anything from him. The Dowdy family has been put in a difficult situation where they felt it was necessary to come to the town to voice a complaint. They didn't, I don't feel that they had any, malice with that complaint. It was just something that needed to be said. And he is operating a business in a residential zone. And our town does not allow that. And the difference with everybody else that is maybe doing something along those lines is there hasn't been a complaint. Now, maybe we're gonna get a whole slew of them afterwards, but we're working on, the planning board is working on making it more conducive to this island, what's going on. So, I'm sorry, but the letter stands. And we just have to work from that. I don't feel, I'd be happy to sit down as a board and discuss it. But I agree with Bob, there's not a whole lot we can do until the ordinance is voted on within the town and it is changed. And that's how I feel.
Just that, I agree with what Jen said. I would add one clarification. A lot of the places that I think people see around town where there's a lot of equipment in the yard relates to home occupation. That's a very clear allowed use of land in our zoning ordinance, both in the residential zone and in the business zone. That's a difference. I can't say that all the places where equipment is stored meet that criteria, but I would say most of them do.
And am I correct in asking that if Jim had a residence on his property, that we would be having a whole different conversation?
We would absolutely be having a whole different conversation.
All right. So where do we go from there?
Nowhere. I waited.
All right. Jim,
All right. So I get you guys all, but there is called, a code of conduct that you guys all have to follow as a town. To say that there is not a complaint for say on another company, that is not equal rights to all. So you cannot blind the eye, no, Bo has a sand pit, he parks all of this stuff at with no residency. None, there's no residency there, so we're gonna go cut and dry, guys. You're right, there's gonna be lots of complaints, you guys can be redoing the whole island, because what you're doing to me is discrimination. 100%, you cannot turn a blind eye on stuff that's going wrong, and then have your town administrator tell her code enforcement that he cannot enforce these laws. That's her recommendation unless there's a complaint. That is not right, that's ethically wrong. So I will not comply to any of your stuff. If you guys don't want to sit down, you guys think it's black and white, then we'll just hash this out the way it needs to be hashed out. This isn't the way that you treat one individual. You got to treat the whole masses the same way. You can't single out one person that when all kinds of people operate in this manner. Okay, I don't care if they got a house here, there's nothing about a vacant lot, you can't park on your property.
There is.
Oh, okay, I'm fine with it, Rob, but you're saying it's black and white. It's not black and white to single out one person and treat them in this manner. And tell a town official not to do his due diligence and overlook other people that are performing in the same way. So I've already asked for special land use permits and all the home occupied business permits. Because even though you have it in your law, a home occupied business should still be permitted through the town, special land use permits. The same paragraph that I'm in, that you guys all say exempt your lobstermen from being treated this way. I'm in the same paragraph as agriculture. So if you guys want to overlook, like these guys are all exempt because they're the lobstermen, they're from the island, they can be treated this way. I'm in the same part of the ordinance as the lobstermen. So if you guys want to keep going down this road and just keep pointing fingers and going in circles, and just really, it's upsetting and disappointing. And that's how I'm gonna leave it. You guys can decide what you're gonna do. I've had enough. Like, there's only so much one man can take, just getting pointed at and drilled all the time. So,
Jim, can you hold on for a second? Can I take a second just to explain why it's different?
I really don't need to know. No, I don't.
Okay.
Because
All right. Thank you. All right, we continue this conversation, Carol.
I just asked, I know Ted is hoping to make the boat home, so if we
Yeah.
want to take his thing out of sequence.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. And I would answer Carol's question, the letter to Jim from Jim Butler, the letter to Mr. Fowler from Mr. Butler went out on the 9th, which makes 14 days on the 23rd, which is next Tuesday. And if he requested in writing an extension to 30 days, that would take it out to June 6th. I would ask that that request only be acknowledged if it comes in writing. I think we need to move away from some of the conversations we've been having and keep this in writing with all the select board being copied.
Carol,
and I would add, if you get a request in writing, I personally would, be willing to agree to a 2-week extension. So I'd be fine to make a motion that if a request comes in writing to extend the time frame till, when was it? June,
The extra 14 days takes it out to June 6th.
June 6th,
it'd be inappropriate to do a motion right now.
okay,
We didn't do this as an agenda item,
oh, yeah, okay,
so,
fine.
all right.
The
They would-
letter said that 14 days extension granted when requested, so there isn't specifics. So I don't know if you really legally are required to have a motion. As
Oh,
long
probably
as you have a consensus agreement on what you're okay with.
Yeah, well, I'm all speaking.
And the letter actually says, if you are unable to complete one or more of the actions, please contact me to discuss before the end of the 14-day period. That's all it says.
Okay.
Me being Mr. Butler.
I know you want to get to other business. Before we leave the town administrator, I just have a couple more things. Yep. When you're ready.
All good? Moving on. Go ahead.
Am I out?
Yep.
Because the little dark green Chevy car that's down at Chandler's Cove parking lot that's been left there by, I think, Rick Taylor for quite a long time, is parked way over near Danny Todd's shed that we moved last winter over to Rod McCormick's property. Do we have a plan to get that out of there? It's pretty much an abandoned illegal vehicle.
I've communicated with some of his family members to get it to be moved.
Any response?
There is a response, it's just taking a little longer than I'd like.
So can we continue to work on that? It's been there a long time. And I'd like to make a quick request / motion for the town administrator. I'd like to direct the town administrator to direct the public works crew to patch all holes in all existing paved roads on the island, including fixing the hill at the Chandler's Cove wharf head area and the sinking culvert that we have never repaired from Julie's mailbox across the South Road out here by June 1st.
Okay.
So we were just talking about how the motion would be, I mean, I feel like this should be an agenda item as a road commissioner discussion.
I didn't know if you, was it a motion or was it
This is a
a
motion.
request? Oh, okay, it's a motion. So,
Why would this be inappropriate?
Well,
Because it's not an
there's
agenda
nothing on the budget or in the town administrator report. I just don't feel like it needs a level of transparency. But I mean, you can make that motion if you want to.
I respectfully disagree. This is just maintenance that I quite frankly have been asking to have done for quite some time now, so my motion stands.
I'll second it.
okay. So
way that if you brought it under business, then it would be appropriate.
Okay. Then put it
In
on,
in my view, that's why we put the other business down there so that we are allowed to discuss and make a possible motion.
even though there's nothing listed about that under
Right.
other business. That's appropriate. My motion still stands right here.
But do we want to discuss it? Any questions? All right, all in favor? All right, all opposed? All right. And I oppose it not for the work, I oppose it because out of order, and I'd rather have it on other businesses. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. All right, anything else? You have something else for the town issue?
No.
Anybody else? All right, moving on to regular business. If the board approves, I'd like to move item 23-048 out of order and put it on right now.
Sure.
All right. So 23-048 to hear an Indian Island update and take any necessary action. I'll hand it over to Ted.
Thank you, and good evening. If I talk, is this thing hear me?
Yes.
It will look at you too.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that, I don't want to. I believe that the genesis of this item was the idea of having an update to make sure that we were all on the same place on the page, but also to use this opportunity for communicate more widely with the town. I should say also that I heard from Penny Asherman at CCLT that they have a board meeting this evening. Otherwise, they would have wanted to be part of this conversation as well. In your March meeting, there was a report out of the results of the working group that Bob and Bo and the Land Trust and I and others were involved in, and the conclusion that we had reached, that the right path forward for the use of Indian Point was to move to a pedestrian walking model as the way that we get there. That was the outcome of a lot of thinking, and then our thinking got accelerated by the storms. And so what I wanted to do this evening, and I think that discussion in March, which I've seen on the video, was a very good and thorough report out of how did we get to that conclusion. So since then, the Brunners and I were here in March, actually several days to try to get our arms around, so where are we now and how do we move forward? We met with the town, we met with code enforcement, and what I'd like to do is just summarize four things that came out of that, that we're working on. And first was storm cleanup, because the December storm did quite a lot of damage to the road and dumped a lot of debris around on Indian Point as it did elsewhere on the island. And I asked the code enforcement officer to actually walk the site immediately so that we could have a clear understanding about what under the definition of maintenance and repair we were going to do that we needed to do, and that everybody was clear about what that consisted of, and that there was not going to be any construction of anything. And so we reached agreement about that, and that's some of that work has begun, and it's going to be going on later this week. So that we're ready to have the summer use walking by the Indian Island owners, as well as by the community, to continue to use Indian Point with that walking model. The Land Trust proposed, and I was very pleased to hear this, the idea of having more of a partnership involvement for that cleanup. And that was the genesis of the Land Trust and us sponsoring an event on Saturday morning to go down and clean up. And the order of business is really to get the man-made debris as much gone as we can. And then the storm damage, natural materials gotten out of the way so that they're safe walking. So that's the first and second. And then our next priority is to mark the path so that it's clear where you walk, so that we mark the hazard because the erosion behind the old, retaining wall has gotten even worse. And there's a significant drop off, and I want that marked with a fence, at least a rope line fence, so that it's clear, be careful here. And similarly, to make sure that people understand about where you walk to get out onto the beach and to go down onto the sandbar, you're not doing more damage to the dune structure. So you keep that in what has always been the road alignment. So those will be our goals on Saturday. And so those are the steps we're hoping to take before the summer starts, so that, we're ready. And then meanwhile, when we met with the town in March, we talked about the traffic and parking on the paved road, which becomes the central issue in terms of all the usage. It was Vika's thought, and we agreed that the right next step was to get clear where the road right away boundary actually is at the top of the New Point Road, which is, get professionals to tell us between the Cottage Road from one side and the North Road from the other side, where exactly are those lines? And then from that, to be in a position to have the right conversation with the adjoining property owners about what configuration of parking on the paved road there would be the best solution. Not a temporary thing we did last year, but to have something that would be the ongoing plan. So I don't know whether the surveyor, you've had any chance to get any action from the surveyors, but I hope that when that can happen, that would be the next step. Based upon that understanding, we have shared with all of the property owners whose properties adjoin right at that spot, so that they're aware that this conversation is sort of in the offing. I think everybody has a sense of it. It would be good to have a well-planned approach. And from the renowned perspective of the neighbors, the priority of safety, that, we're going to have on a continuing basis in the summertime, a lot of people walking. At the same time, we're going to have traffic and parking, and we just have to plan for that and have an intelligent approach. So I think we have more to come on that front. And then the last point I would mention that we also talked about was it would be a good idea to document the closeout of the old agreement from 2002, which I think this group all understands that, but we ought to record that so that there's a record that everybody understands. And the suggestion was, let's get through the completion of this town year before we take that legal step. So that's sort of a cleanup activity. I think that we have agreed that would be desirable to do. What form that would take as a letter, or how exactly that would be to be worked out under the new in a new year. So those are the things that I wanted to report out. But also to see if any of the members of the select board, from the conversations that you've been having, are there other questions that people might want to hear that I could help with?
Bob, are you, my experience in doing beach cleanup activities is there's usually 10 times as much stuff as we estimate before we go down there. Are you able to get four-wheel drive vehicles down to the base of the hill still to facilitate the cleanup?
Yes, we are able to get vehicles, on a plan, so we know what vehicle and what purpose, and we can do that, and we will do that. And so the idea is that we're going to invite people to, use the big trash bags, and then we'll mobilize as much as it takes to get the stuff removed.
But hopefully throw them in a pickup so that people don't have to walk up the hill with a big trash bag.
Right.
Yeah.
So the idea is to film and then stash them and then do a cleanup. And the general approach that we have in mind is, the man-made materials first, and then the miscellaneous debris second. And the things that are natural material, logs and stuff that are really just natural materials, can stay on the site. They just need to be, we put in a place where they're not gonna be in the way and they're not gonna start floating around again. Things that are, pieces of docks and stuff that have arrived down there, we're gonna wanna get those out of there. And there may be some of those that are gonna take some, planned action just because of the size. So that's kind of what we're looking at. On the man-made part of it, depends on how many people come and how much there is. But there's a long shore, that the conservation easement of the Indian Point and an Indian Point is 3,700 feet. So only a small part of that is involved with the road, but the more that, I think it'd be great if we could have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, the school kids did a cleanup down there several years ago.
Yeah.
We focused on the cove.
Yeah.
And I actually took my tractor and trailer down there and we filled it up a couple times, but we stayed away from the lobster traps that were down there, because they're lobster traps.
Yeah.
Was later told we probably should have taken them because I can't remember which cousin it was, I believe it. Maybe Anida belongs to those traps, and they said he's not gonna be using them when he's not around anymore, whatever. But that's a whole, getting those out of the whole thing. What about those parts of the seawall that are actively breaking down? Is that gonna, you're not gonna try to like pull anything out of the ground?
That's one of the big things I said, that talking about code enforcement, we're not planning to do anything about that structure as part of this.
Then,
So the structure, where there's a engine and the radiator and that will just stay
Well, for now,
Yeah. Until it moves around a little more, but. And have you, it might be premature to ask this, but have you as a group talked about what you perceive to be the parking up top, or what you hope it to look like number of cars versus, is it gonna go, do you want it to go further into the land of, asking the neighbors for some more room? Do you have an idea of what you're looking for?
and then the short answer is no, not really. And part of that is because the company isn't the landowner. So that there needs to be, the people who are the landowners need to be involved in that conversation. And I try to say, listen, I don't want to get.
And have we asked Owen Haskell about any guess at a possible time period of it?
Emailed and I asked for a time frame and gave a description of the area and a possible quote, but I have not heard back.
Thank you.
So I need to follow up on that.
He did the previous survey, right?
I'm sorry?
He did the previous survey? Who did the survey?
There are several surveys that have been done over the years, including going back to the E.C. Jordan period, and Owen Haskell hasn't inherited a gold record.
Okay.
I've been talking with John Schwander from Owen Haskell a lot lately. There's also now a database that most surveyors in the state of Maine are participating in, where all of their data is available to all of them. They no longer have to ask. They can just go into the database and get it. Not all of the surveys that have been done on Chubig are part of that. One surveyor in particular is not part of that, but the bigger ones are, so that will help. But he is, I talked to him yesterday, not about this, but about other stuff, and he said, still just flat out crazy trying to keep up.
Yeah.
Karen,
So it sounds like, the season starts in a week.
Yeah.
We're not gonna have a parking lot there then. So I think we need an interim plan to deal with parking, and it seems like parking enforcement is gonna be pretty essential. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on an interim plan, or, the group, any to share with us, and also on enforcement, because I think I don't see people just voluntarily complying. I don't know, how well did that work last year, actually, I don't know.
Well, I think, my comment on that is that a lot of the time it worked okay, but sometimes it didn't. And that the feedback from people I've heard is that you can't block the driveways and you can't, which includes the line of, the road, that, that's somebody's driveway. And so I think that in the immediate run, it's gonna need to be, have it be clear that you gotta stay on that shoulder. I don't think that there's any objection, just while this gets figured out, to continue to do what was done last year with the understanding that you gotta stay in the right boundaries. And I think it's possible that the way this ought to be marked ultimately, and this is just me talking, is to have it, however it's depicted, having the same park only between signs or something like that.
Yeah.
So that it's clear, is it?
Following up on what Carol mentioned as an interim plan. I don't know that last year the town had any conversations with the two landowners. Maybe Ted, did the town actually, or maybe Vika, did the town talk to the two landowners, or did we just sort of mark out the side of the road?
The town didn't, but I think
I did,
Okay.
hosted, actually a meeting with all those landowners to explain what we were working out with you. And I hosted another meeting with that same group following your March meeting, so that they would know what the direction was.
So,
Talking to the Sand Valley heirs just the other day, they have not heard from the town as yet.
No.
And they're the ones that are they're not the only ones. They and the Clarks are the ones that are on that side of the road, and then there's, the other side of the road is not in the situation.
so it might make sense to have a meeting like Ted had with the affected landowners, and maybe Ted could share the list of who those are. Because clearly the Clarks and the heirs and the Ballards, and then from an access standpoint, it's Susie and the family of the Blue House down the road. But whatever the appropriate families are, I think our direction had been to wait till we had a survey before we could do something. But to Carol's point, now that it's summertime, why don't we meet with those families and map out an interim solution while we're waiting for the survey for a more permanent solution? Would that make any sense?
I would think so.
And would that be the town administrator and a couple of select board members meeting with that group, or be?
I think it could be the group.
you guys are the road commissioners, so you would have to decide, who wants to be there.
Good point.
Carol,
Can you refresh my memory though? Did we have a limitation on the number of cars on the road last year?
Last year, we just put 5 up on top, that was lost down at the bottom.
So and is that our philosophy for this year too?
Well, back to the question of how did it look last year? 5, from my driving by, riding my bike by observations, 5 was good a good bit of the time, but there were times that there were 7 or 8 parked there. Just from a pure traffic planning standpoint, if you create 10 spots,
I know.
12 will get used. But
So maybe keep it to 5 and
maybe,
then,
at least until we have a better plan, because going from 5 to any bigger number is gonna have more of an impact on the landowners.
and how about a bike rack? Would that be beneficial?
The town purchased a bike rack last year, and we've received positive feedback, and my understanding, Phyllis said is, they are gonna purchase another one this year, so, because that was used, regularly. Then the bike rack that we purchased was like $190, and it fit, I think, like 10 bikes, and it seemed like it was almost done.
So are you and Bob and Vika willing to get together and talk about this?
fine with me as long as,
And that's my suggestion,
Yeah,
is you three, if you have time to pull it off at some point. I realize it's crunch time in the town office, but
So Ted, if you can send us those names
I
and
was
stuff.
going to send you the names and the email contact. information
yeah, that'd be great.
for
That'd be great.
that.
Carol,
So on a sort of separate topic. And you don't have to answer this now, but I was wondering if, you know, you would be interested, the group, the corporation would be interested in restoring the beach at all. Because there are money, you know, there's potential, money's available, that's a very specific designation as a coastal barrier resource, highly protected. So I think there's a high potential, we could get some funding to restore the dunes, to kind of remove some of the debris, there's some pretty, you know, hazardous stuff sticking out of the ground down there. So I don't know if that's something you're interested in. I think, you know, I personally would be quite willing to pursue that with the group. I mean, the land trust, I think, would probably also be willing. But I think there would be an opportunity to kind of bring it to a more natural state and potentially even do some nature-based solutions to help minimize the erosion as opposed to sort of hardscaping kind of solution. So it's just something to think about, but there's infrastructure money available to do that kind of thing these days. So it's something you could consider. But personally, I would love to see it, you know, some of the hazardous materials out of there so that it's accessible. And it might minimize the issue with the cliff behind the seawall so that you could potentially restore it, replant the dunes and kind of let it naturally success back. And people like Pete Slavinsky, who I'm sure we could get his thoughts on that when he's here this summer.
It's an interesting idea, and I think what I will do is, and if this is something that you all think is worth giving some thought to, I will share that, and that we have, our organizations will both be meeting over June and through the July 4th holiday, and we'll just get that sort of on people's radar screen as something to think about going forward.
All right, yeah, questions?
Yeah, thank you for all of your work and for the patience of all the neighbors and the Indian Island Corporation.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for the interest and for giving the chance to have this communication. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So I think our next steps are to meet the neighbors about parking, also, next year probably, or next, you know, in July or something, or this fall, look into how to properly, dismantle the agreement within the aisle. I know I didn't use the right word. I can't remember what it's called. So, but yeah, so. All right, anything else? Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking your week.
Yeah. Have a good night. All right, moving on to 23-045 to authorize the town administrator to sign the Cumberland County Sheriff Agreement for law enforcement services. All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to authorize the town administrator to sign the Cumberland County Sheriff's Agreement for law enforcement services for the upcoming year.
Carol seconded?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. All right, is there any questions, any comments? Mark?
If you look at page 2, under Article 2, levels of service, paragraph D. While contracted to provide law enforcement services, the deputy sheriff will enforce Big Island town ordinances that are applicable within the town and also state laws, is what it says after that. My point is, I think there has been maybe some slight hesitation or reluctance in the past to help us enforce some of our ordinances. I understand that. I'm not saying anything has been done maliciously or wrong. but that is what it says, and I think that's what we expect, so. I think there should be some. Reinforcement of that to make sure that we do get some assistance from the county sheriff to enforce some of our local ordinances. When it comes to parking and traffic, and I think that the sheriff, deputy sheriff, Bob will be. Probably glad to help us out in that area if requested, so I'm just pointing that out to everyone. Thank you.
Just a question on that follow-up, how do you? I mean, it doesn't really say how we. I don't know, start the conversation with him about it. Doesn't say anything about that, then we just.
Well, it says the deputy sheriff will enforce your Big Island town ordinances that are applicable to the town. That's pretty clear to me.
Well, I understand that, but if it's pointed out by one of us or a community member about that ordinance, does it go to, does it go to the sheriff, or does it go to the deputy, or something in writing, phone call? Is that how, I'm just curious about.
I'm not sure I follow what your question.
How do you point it out to the sheriff if there was a
sentence?
violation?
The sentence?
Yeah,
Well, we will likely authorize the town administrator to sign the document on behalf of the town of Shabig to engage the sheriff's department for the summer, so. I'm suggesting that the town administrator can just say that this was pointed out at the meeting by the select board. If the rest of the select board agrees that it should be pointed out and reminded to the sheriff that we may need some assistance with some local ordinance enforcement. So,
okay.
This discussion makes me wonder, whether you will provide him with, copies of some ordinances, I mean,
yeah, it says that right after that somewhere, Jackie, and I've lost it. Sorry, I'll look at it. I'll look for it. I mean, I have read through the documents, but they're terribly.
yeah, I read through it.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Carol,
In fact, this is the first time I've seen this. Is this consistent with previous years in terms of the time frame? Is it the same as always? That's right. And any other significant changes from the previous years? And then one kind of technical thing, which, personally doesn't matter to me, but I just want to be sure, because this document says town manager. And the signature is town manager or clerk, or what is it? It's, and I guess I thought that there was somewhat of a difference between the authority of a town manager and a town administrator in terms of,
It has to be attested by the clerk, and my signature above is attested by her. That's how we've done it in the past.
right, so, but I mean, it doesn't matter, as long as the board approves it, it's fine, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you authorize me to sign,
And
and then
that's all, okay.
under town of Shabig is where I would sign and date, and then Chris attests my signature under as the clerk and the date underneath
But
it.
it doesn't matter that it says manager on your list, right?
No, because the county manager isn't attesting my signature, the town clerk is.
And do we know who the person is gonna be for this summer?
The sheriff,
Yeah,
Bob Milne.
it is gonna be.
I would suggest that we ask the town administrator to include during the months that we have the deputy on the island, the second and third items under reports on page 4 as part of our normal report out of the department.
page 4.
Could you say that again, Bob?
On page 4,
Yeah,
there are 6 report and date items listed in the table at the top of the page.
yeah.
And I'm suggesting that items 2 and 3 at least be included in the monthly departmental report that the TA provides from other departments.
Sounds good.
I agree.
Could I point one more thing out, Bo? On page 6 is the answer to Jackie's question, if I may. Top of the page. A, the town shall provide the sheriff 2 copies of the Shabig Island Town Code of Ordinances of Law Enforcement Interest as adopted with revisions as enacted by town meeting. And yes, but you know, I'll answer Carol, this is consistent with previous years except the amount obviously has been going up for budgetary discussion, but the time frame is similar and the duties are and descriptions are all pretty good.
All right. Any other comments?
One comment, those 2 items, those 2 references to ordinances. To me, the first one says something different than the second one says. The first one just says Shabig ordinances. Second one says the Shabig Island Town Code of Ordinances of Law Enforcement Interest. So those might mean 2 different things. In other words, after reading the second one on page 6, I'm less inclined to ask the sheriff to enforce a zoning issue. For example. And I was just looking through our documents to see what law enforcement ordinances we have. So off-vehicle highway.
Our parking.
Yeah,
Would be one.
so those would be the ordinances we would want to get him copies of, I would think. The ones that relate to law enforcement.
Mark.
And I will say, I did witness Deputy Bob, Sheriff Bob, mailman being very helpful more than once down at Stone Wharf to the harbor master for helping visually watch while he moved the boat that needed to be moved that the owner refused to move, is what I was told. And I think the sheriff was watching so that no damage was done and that there could be no complaint. I thought that was very good teamwork. I wanted to point that out.
All right. Any other comments? Any comments from the public? All right, so we're Bob, the motion,
We have a motion, yeah, Bob, Karen,
Just to add to that, tomorrow, and Mark, I sent forward to you the email because you were interested, I think it was the beginning of last week. Tomorrow, CTC and myself were meeting with in terms of the follow-up discussions that took place last spring about whether they're gonna do or can they do something to assist with the rowdiness of the hotel guests late evenings after the events when it comes to CDC transportation. So,
Carol.
So is it our sort of position, as I recall, that, you know, we give them this year to kind of get it under control, otherwise we may be looking at requiring them to hire law enforcement. Is that the message you're gonna get?
yeah, I think, you know, we, with the new management, and I think CPC is on the same board as kind of come on a communicative approach to let them know the issues that have been experiencing, because we did last year look into increase in law enforcement through Columbus Day, and that would have been $50,000. And so the town, you know, can take the cost of that and put it on the inn if they had to, but obviously coming in with the approach of, you know, let's work together, see what can be figured out. And if you're not willing to cooperate, then we on behalf of the town will have to make changes to help us with that, so.
Mark.
I'm embarrassed to say that I forgot that I agreed to that. Can you remind me what I agreed to?
To meet with CTC and the management in discussion about how they can help contain their guests.
What time?
It's tomorrow at 1 PM at the CDC office.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'll be there.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all in favor? All right. Moving on.
23-046 to discuss the proposal for engineering and coastal modeling services. Stone Wharf Improvement Project from Weston Sampson and take any necessary action. Is there a motion?
Just to get the conversation started, I would make a motion that we empower the town administrator to sign the agreement and begin the process.
For a second?
Second.
Second, all right. I'll go first, Bob.
I read through it, I think it looks great. I had a little bit of a question that maybe you could answer at the end. The wording sounded like the $6,700 left at the end for these two optional tasks could be spent on one or the other of them. Is that what they're saying?
That was my understanding.
And that would be a decision we would make as we got further down the road, or say, spend half of it on this and half of it on that, or whatever.
Yeah, my understanding in here, they say upon request, so upon, the board deciding what they want to do, let them know. That's kind of how I took it.
All right, Mark,
Could I ask for a reminder of where we're going to be with this financially? We have a grant that's going to be a reimbursement style grant, is that correct?
We have a grant and we are required to match $25,000 of that, which is coming out of the grant matching funds. So
So,
that's where the 75 in total comes
so the
from.
grant upon reimbursement will pay 50 and we'll pay 25.
Correct.
Thank you.
But to answer the question, the money, will it come out of the Stone Pier Fund until we get reimbursed?
You have to.
Right? That's what I would.
I believe that is correct, yes. I don't want to misspeak, but this is not the type of a grant that we receive money up front. Right. I don't want to misspeak. I believe that's correct.
That's what I thought. So
Yeah.
we'll probably have to pay it and we'll get reimbursed.
And then replenish the specific reserve fund. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and if, as the bills come, you would have to authorize me to expend them out of it, so you'll know the expenditures as they're happening.
Thank you.
any other comments and questions?
I read through it too, and it's very thorough. Not that I understand it all, but
Yeah, I guess my overall comment is I like the detail that they put into the scope and kind of what the deliverables are. And also, I like that they made the FEMA map change optional, because what I understand, what we heard from DOT is that that's probably not going to be necessary. So, and also I thought the time frame, it's, well, it's pretty good. We should be done in the fall, and that might allow us to jump on to the next step pretty soon. So
All right,
I think it's good. And I think getting another set of eyes on it's going to be beneficial, and it's no criticism of the prior contractors. It's really just a good practice.
I agree.
anything? Anything from the public? All right, all in favor?
No questions. It's all right, and I could be, whether I read it in here or whether it's a thought that comes, are there, individuals that want to participate and sit on some of these meetings? Because working with them, so with my experience and having worked with the other ones, there were one or two board members that were, would join in on these meetings, and then we would bring it to the board for the follow-up. So are there individuals that want to participate in that?
I'd be happy to.
So 3 of you raised your hands, so.
Or I can pass, and these guys can do it, whatever you want.
So you guys were pointing at each other. So I don't know who was deciding. Rock, paper, scissors?
I'm happy to do it if nobody else.
And I'll be an alternate if somebody gets sick.
Okay, so Bob and Carol with Jen and alternate.
Whatever.
Oh, that's right, yeah, great, that was the name.
All right, good.
Yes, thank you.
All right, moving on, 23-047 to discuss parking and road signs on Bennett Cove Road and take any necessary action. So this came about, from an email from Jackie, about, reestablishing the stop sign that was at the end of Bennett's.
And then there was some discussion about potentially doing a three-way stop or whatever, so. Now we're discussing it. Mark,
I mean, obviously, putting the stop sign back where you come out of Venice to go back into the intersection is a no-brainer. I think we should do that as soon as we get a stop sign. I also think that the sign that's been broken off late in the bushes should be fixed at some point that says right away to the shore. It's an easy fix. Down below, we now know where our surveying is. I don't think we're prepared to say that we're ready to do anything differently down there yet, but we may be at some point. But people, it's an interesting mix from now through the end of the summer. The barging is still going to continue, and people like to go down and go to the beach. And so I think we probably should think about encouraging some sort of consistent activity if we can do that. Meaning, if you're driving down to Venice to go to the beach, I realize we haven't made it any different down there yet, but maybe we should encourage people to park, I don't know, on the left or something as you're driving down, and have a couple of signs that say beach parking this side only. And maybe even invest in a bicycle rack and put it on the town area to the left there where Amos's old boat is, just a suggestion.
I agree with all that. I would make one more suggestion. I don't know, has there ever been a speed limit sign? Before that stop sign or right after that stop sign?
Yeah, there's one that
There's a speed limit sign.
15 miles per hour.
by the telephone pole, isn't it?
Yeah, it's between Kristen's place and the corner.
What I was thinking of was more a sign that was aimed at letting the truck drive, very forcefully telling the truck drivers that the speed limit on this should be is 30 miles an hour maximum. I've made 2 phone calls in the past 3 weeks to owners of companies saying your driver, truck number, thus and such, was going well over 30 miles an hour, please speak to them, and they agreed to do so. I think we just need to be vigilant about that. We can ask Officer Mailman's help as well, but we don't need those trucks going 45 miles an hour down the road. That's just, so I'm suggesting that as part of this signage, we put a sign up where it's very visible to those trucks as they're coming off that says speed limit from this point forward is 30 miles an hour. All right.
Could I just ask where you envision that sign? I
Uh,
heard you say as they're coming off,
I would
and that
guess,
alarmed me.
no, I'm thinking beyond the stop sign.
Yeah, that's,
You
On the
mean on
right,
the asphalt?
yes, once you hit the asphalt on the right, flashing lights, gate.
Speed trap.
Boom.
oh,
And so question for Vika, I heard maybe from you or from somebody that we found a cache of signs on somebody's property down by a kid's place, right?
Correct, the property owners allowed Public Works permission to go and get them. They said they're just right there, and Public Works said they've been down there twice and there hasn't been anything there, so they're gonna go check again. There's been a lot of work coming in and out of there in the property, so I suspect they may have gotten moved around. But Chuck did say we have stop signs, at least one that we can put, right away down there, so.
I do have
We're still
contact,
hunting for those signs, I guess.
I do have contact with the gentleman that owns that piece of property, so I can give him a text and follow up on him. That way.
Good.
Can I make one comment? So one of the things that, through communication that comes to me, with some of the parking issues down there, there's a very clear sign on one side of the street saying no overnight parking, but there isn't on the other side, and that's where people have seemed to have left a van or two in recent months for overnight parking, so maybe putting the same type of a parking sign on both sides, so that people don't assume that there is no sign in one that it could be on the other. And then as far as your speed limit, I wonder with all the technology, if there's kind of solar stickers or something you can put on them, so then during the day they're flashing.
Be great.
Could be a suggestion, something to look into, so then, you know, they just automatically start flashing during the day, so that might help.
Yep.
The truck drivers, yeah.
Thank you.
I like it.
What was your I'm sorry, Mike. What was your recommendation about below on, what kind of signs did you want put there?
I just wondered if we should have one at some point that says beach parking this side, see how it works. And realizing that it's a congested area down.
Sorry, Carol.
So my follow-up comment to that is which side, because typically when I've been down there, I park on the left side as you're going towards the cove, but I don't know if Jackie, as a local property owner, has a suggestion.
Well, I've thought about it a lot, you know, sort of in preparation. I'll say in preparation for this meeting. Really, whether it's the beachgoers or the trucks. Ideally, you don't want them parked where they're impeding turning. So I guess I would recommend the beach parking be up the road a little bit and not down at the bottom. Maybe you know, I don't know how many spaces, 3 or 4. This morning, you know, there were 3, maybe 4 of our tournaments. And at some point, there was a truck over on the left and that other heating oil, I can't remember what it's called. I think that truck was on the right. You know, one of my number 1 notes is allowing access for emergency vehicles, which is next to him when it's really congested down there. If there were an emergency on the beach or up at Hanscom's, I don't know what it would look like. I mean, it would be a mess. And recently, well, it isn't recent, but it's sort of come to the top recently. Perhaps for what is the committee, Carol, the vulnerabilities?
Climate committee,
Pardon?
the climate committee?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the subject of emissions has risen to the top in my brain. And by that, I mean the idling engine. Sometimes for an hour at a time.
Again, a little off topic, I'm sorry,
Well,
we're talking about signs.
recognize that, but you know, these are all things, I'll just cut to one of the chases. And that is, I think that we need to revisit the idea of perhaps limiting the number of trucks that can stage down at the bottom. And by stage, I mean line up, not block, you know, totally block it up. So limit the number of whatever kind of trucks, you know, there are all kinds that can park down there and have the rest park up on what I call the main road.
Yes.
So Carol, you may know the answer to this, but I believe that there is a statewide ordinance around commercial parking near protected sand dunes.
Personally, I'm not aware of anything.
So I'll look that up. It's something that I heard in the conversation, so I wanted to make the point that the dunes at Venice Cove are protected. And that, you know, there's pretty significant damage to the sand dunes as a result of the commercial traffic.
Right. Thank you. All right, Mark.
Very quickly about signs. I think at some point we'll have to have another conversation, probably another time, about that intersection of Venice Cove Road, Chandler's Road, South Road, and Deer Point or Army Road. Because we may want to think about, is that going to be a two-way stop, three-way stop, remain the way it is, blah, blah, blah. So, and then we'll probably have to have some more discussions about Venice Cove, and I won't get going on it now, but I think we can all agree that now that we have a survey down there, we've taken small step number one. Now what? Staging area, improvement of safety, parking, etc. Thank you.
All right. Jen.
I just wanted to point out and remind everybody that we've lost a lot of signs, and I think that if we're going to put up a whole bunch of new ones, and if they're gonna be flashing, that's just gonna be really more enticing to those people that. I'm sorry. But if we put up a lot more signage or signs, and if they're flashing, or that's just gonna kind of sweeten the pot as far as the people that like to take signs. So a conversation with our law enforcement when they get here might be in order.
Oh,
I would also suggest that we ask the road crew to Public Works to use bolting strategies that cannot be removed. Make it as hard as possible. Whether it's double nutting or welding the bolts on, welding the nuts in place. But make it harder than just taking the bolt and nut off the part that's in the ground versus the part that's at the bottom, or the part, the sign itself.
Well, there's the sawing off.
They did that with the ones that were harder to. Public Works.
it still goes back to, they shouldn't have done it, they shouldn't be taking the sign, but I
I'm saying
understand. what
make
you're
it as
saying.
hard as possible. Sawing them off is harder than using a wrench.
Yeah, I think they started doing that recently, and the ones that they did do that, there was something specific bolts that they could buy or
Yeah.
something like that, and then they just. cut the
Tamper
whole
proof
bolt.
bolts. Yeah, let's make it harder.
Okay. All right, so I have, so do we need a motion, or is it just a consensus from the board to add signage and direct the town administrator?
Can I go through the list so I understand exactly what, so I have put up the stop sign.
At the top of Bennett.
At the top of Venice, Stephen Venice, yeah. Right away to shore sign to be put back up. Do you want another no overnight parking sign? Okay, and then the other two that I had that were questionable was beach parking this side. Is that something you're interested in?
I would recommend it.
I think we should encourage one side parking.
Probably worth a try, parking this side only, or
Yeah,
beach
that-
parking this side.
Parking this
I
side.
think parking this side only and not sorry.
Where?
And somebody might say, well, I'm not beach parking,
Yeah.
I'm barge parking, you know, so just say beach parking. this side.
Well, the thing that with that is people that are waiting for the bar to be parking over there. People that want to go to the beach won't be able to park there. So I know it's catch 22.
Well, you guys know better. I don't know.
We'll look around, they can look around to see what more beach friendly road sign would be.
And
And then do you want a bike rack or no?
I
I
think
would
that's a
say, yeah.
good
How
idea.
much would that be, do you think?
The one that we purchased for Bennett last year, I believe it was about $197.
So you can just take that out of an account.
Yeah, last
You
year
don't
I
need a-
pulled it out of public works account.
You're all set with that? Thank you.
That's a good list.
The other one was 30-mile-an-hour sign.
Oh, sorry.
35-mile-an-hour sign.
30.
30.
$50.
I was also wondering, I've seen some signs before where, it says no idling,
With
no idling.
So basically shut off your engine, there's no idling allowed in this area or something. That might be something we might want to put in that area, the same sign, basically the sign that says 24-hour parking. That there's no idling. Yes,
I appreciate that suggestion a lot, because there are a lot of diesel fumes down there. When I looked into it, I think it needs to be an ordinance. We need an a no idling in ordinance. I think it would be a great idea for the whole island. And especially,
okay. Might be
We all
something
do it
to
at
look
Stone
into.
Fair.
Sorry,
Well, we do it at the Stone Fair too, so I think it does require some thought, or we just, I think it's a good idea,
okay,
but I wouldn't just.
Oh. we'll look into that, see if we need something. And then using harder work to take off.
I just have one comment. So I think with a lot of these, we probably will either have them or they're ones that are being replaced, but last budget season, money was removed out of street signs, so just food for thought. There is a line item for street signs. So, which I mean, there is a line item, it's not budgeted, so I think the overall public works budget is very healthy, so it wouldn't impact, but just for future budget discussions, it might be helpful.
Can I-
just to add a
Can I
couple of
recommend that she gets like a quote when you take it out of beach access fund? I don't know, that'd be appropriate, but. Here,
Yeah, I guess my only question on that is, so say you buy a sign, and even though no money's budgeted, do you assign it to that line item? That's what I would recommend.
Yes.
That way we
Yes.
know where it came from,
Yeah.
but it doesn't, I don't,
Yeah.
I think that's
I agree.
cleaner.
Yeah.
And then maybe next year we
Yes,
budget $500.
and that's the point that I was just making, that there is an official budget for it, but the overall budget's okay, so it'll be fine, but just for future.
But I mean, we might restore that budget next year if we think we need to.
Mark, and very quickly, I think the speed limit sign that we may be adding or may not, I'm not sure where the 30-mile-an-hour one is between the intersection of Chandler's and South Road going up. There's one there somewhere. But I think if we add one, we were thinking about requesting it to be added between that intersection and South Shore Drive, if there isn't one there already, correct?
there was one, just before the hill crest there, or
That's why I said that.
like in that clearing where
And then one more point, these signs that I'm be describing are not enforceable, but a lot of times in areas like Venice Cove Road, east, South Road from the end down through. We put slow yellow signs, congested area. They can't be enforced by a law enforcement officer with tickets, but they sometimes work visually for some people.
Um, If there is excessive idling, I think an hour constitutes excessive, I mean, maybe less than that, but certainly. What should my course of action be?
Call the town administrator.
Take a potato.
Or call it demonstrator.
Yeah.
Stuff. Probably 2015. There was a truck idling between the mailbox and the lower driveway for hours. And I asked the driver, why he needed to keep the engine on. And that, well, this he is fine. Is there a response to my question about my course of action besides the potato?
Once again, to call the town administrator would be the first course, or the deputy.
Or the deputy, okay.
Those would be the options.
Yeah, that's sort of what I. Come with it.
All right. All right. Any other discussion on this? You have your orders. All right. Moving on. And to other business.
All right,
Go ahead.
can I ask a technical question, maybe?
Mhm.
How come that wasn't a motion? When we've done signs before, we had
Yeah.
to make a motion and then.
It's on the
Good point.
Well, some of these are just replacing signs.
Okay,
So
like,
we already had a motion. Yeah, we do have some new ones in there. We probably should. Thank you. So,
We make a motion that we move forward with the signs as just discussed and listed by the town administrator.
all right,
second.
all right. Any more discussion?
I just wanted
Go
to make
ahead.
the point that we're adding a lot more signs, and I think it's not gonna solve all the problems that we have. I hope that maybe it makes some improvements, but I'm not in favor of just throwing signs of, the more that we can condense those signs to maybe say one thing, a bunch of things in one sign. I might be in favor of, but I'm a little confused on how many signs we got going all over the place.
So,
Well, this sort of crossed my mind. I didn't want to bring it up. But do we provide any information to all these truck drivers about kind of the expectations?
About what?
About expectations, this is the speed limit, please don't idle more than 5 minutes or whatever. I mean, we could ask for some voluntary compliance with some certain criteria, and I was just wondering, do we tell them anything? Or, I think that would be simple to come up with a sheet that we give to them and explain it, and while they're sitting there idling, they could read it. It's just a thought.
Mark,
My answer to that is, no, we haven't really given a handout, but I think it's probably worth something to think about. Some sort of a discussion between the town of Shebig and both barging companies about whether that could be something that could be implemented in the future.
any other discussion? All right, all in favor? All right, all against? Opposing, okay. And opposed. All right, moving on to other business. Is there any other business? No? All right, moving over to communication. Bob?
The two, one came up yesterday, has continued all day today. And a butter asked me to look at construction work that's underway on South Shore Drive. And followed up with an email to Mr. Butler and the town administrator, which has gone now back and forth several times. There's no building permit yet. There's been a lot of conversation, but there's no building permit issued. There's been no check submitted. There are DEP reports that have apparently been pulled, but they have not been given to the code officer. There's been preparation for work. There is erosion control in place. And there's a very large hole the size of a foundation. And the response I got to the question about the hole was they're exploring, looking to see how deep ledge is. The hole's as big as a foundation and as deep as a foundation. And yes, there's ledge there. I can't imagine how that should be allowed to happen without a building permit being in place. And it's not. Supposedly the package is going to be available to look at tomorrow morning in the town office. But I just can't imagine how we can let work of that magnitude happen without a permit being in place. Ideally posted, which is a requirement, but it doesn't always happen. So that was one, and
Can I ask a question?
mhm.
Can I ask a question about that?
Mhm.
Is it the resident or whatever part of that growth permit, are they listed on it? Not that it matters for the food plant, but I'm just curious. Do they have a growth?
I don't know what they're proposing to build because there hasn't been a package to look at. If it's a ADU, they would not need a growth permit. If it's a new home on a distinct piece of land, they would need a growth permit. Accessory dwelling unit.
Can I ask a clarifying question? South Shore Drive is what some people call Coleman Cove Road.
I have not forgotten what my second one was. I'll think of it.
All right, any other communications? Carol?
I heard it from a community member who had a concern about an injured bird. And they contacted the animal control officer who said that they only deal with domestic animals, not wild animals. And so the upshot was that they contacted, I think it's actually John Rich contacted Inland Fish and Wildlife. Turned out they came out, the bird was shot, had been shot, it was a heron. And they are in the process of doing an investigation, is what I understand. So I'm bringing that to your attention. And the individual that spoke to me said, you know, it would be really helpful if the animal control officer, understanding their jurisdiction, if they had a, set of numbers that folks could call, for things that are not domestic, so that they would, a set of resources that they could deal with. So anyway, but they were concerned because the bird had been shot, and apparently the state was concerned enough to investigate. Don't know anything more than that.
Okay, all right.
Carol White and I and town administrator received a communication from Matt Ridgway, CTC, about the deterioration of or further deterioration of the wharf head over at Cousins Island. I have not responded yet. I don't believe, maybe
You did, you
I
acknowledged
wrote,
it.
thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
I think we should follow up on that as a town to make sure that CTC and the town of Yarmouth are making a plan. That's Yarmouth's responsibility. So for the safety of the traveling public and residents, I think we should follow up on that.
Yeah, I noticed some of the wharf planks also are popping up at a few places.
Yeah, some issues over there.
So,
Didn't remember my second one. And maybe this should have been in new business. It relates to the hearing that's happening next week with the Board of Appeals. There's been some emails going back and forth about attorneys and that kind of thing. I would suggest that we for these committees who need legal advice, that we follow the committee's recommendation as to whether they need an attorney present at the hearing or not. And in this case, I think that committee chair has told us that they don't need to have an attorney present. So I would recommend we not spend that money. But my general recommendation would be that if the planning board or the Board of Appeals has gotten approval from us for the expenditure of legal funds, that we follow their lead on how those funds get spent, if we approve it.
Carol,
And on that same issue, at a prior meeting, we had a discussion about that case, and I recall saying that I thought it was important that we let the Board of Appeals know that if they need legal assistance, that we would support that. So I was surprised to see an email sort of to the contrary of that coming from the town administrator, because we definitely discussed it at the meeting, and I think our philosophy has been to support I think it's a good investment for all parties involved, both the opponents and proponents and the town. And I understand our legal budget is expended, but even so, I still think it's a good strategy. And so I didn't understand the email that I saw as I read down, sort of saying, discouraging them from pursuing that. I think what is needed is a policy that's clear about them contacting the town administrator, any committee, and saying, I need to contact this attorney for this particular reason, and making sure that the town attorney is in the loop. It isn't okay for the board itself to just willy-nilly contact an attorney. I think that's true.
Mark,
But given what you just said, and I don't disagree with all of it, with the current environment that's going on in this community, I believe there's some value, even though we have completely expended and now we're into our select board contingency account for legal. I believe there's some value in having a land use knowledgeable attorney, and that would be Mary Costigan, from what I saw of her appearance one at this upcoming meeting next Thursday, because I believe that the challenge is being brought to probably challenge the decision of a previous decision of the Board of Adjustment and Appeals more than the ordinance. So my opinion is that legal counsel for this upcoming meeting would be money well spent.
Bob,
Mark, are you suggesting that we encourage the chair of the Board of Appeals to avail that committee of the presence of Ms. Costigan?
I am.
Carol,
I would agree with that. I guess maybe you can clarify, is it correct that they have been in touch with Mary Costigan about this particular hearing coming up on the 25th?
My knowledge of that was the chair reached out to me and asked if the chair could make a quick call to Mary, and I said, go for it. And I asked if legal advice was needed, and the response was no. We were advised from our attorney. From my perspective, where the concern was to my knowledge, it was a quick conversation, but then the town received a bill of over $500, where there was multiple hours of communications over the course of the month about a couple different things, which is what stemmed that email. The other part is the original agreement with Mary was to cover, and it specified was for the previous appeal and the previous appeal only. And so we would need an ongoing, and that's where I was going with it. Board of Selectmen would need, an ongoing contract with that attorney to allow those communications, because that one agreement that was signed was very specific for that previous hearing. And I in no way was trying to discourage them reaching out.
Okay.
It's that I was concerned that steps were being taken outside of what was originally done, and that I wanted to make sure that the proper steps were followed.
So that seems very logical to me, and I agree that we should probably enter into a separate general contract with Mary to advise the Board of Appeals. And so I'd recommend we go ahead and do that. And I don't know if that needs to be a motion.
I think what the motion would need is when whatever the paperwork they
Okay,
provide, you would need to authorize and be okay with that agreement. So I can contact them to see if that's something that they're interested in doing.
So the issue is, we're not gonna have that before the 25th. Well, we're not gonna have a meeting before the 25th.
If you feel like she is needed there, I can contact to see if, you know, if she can make it to the meeting. I went off of the email from the chair saying, no, they didn't need the, which is why I didn't bother contacting Natalie. But if you want Mary there, then I can reach out and ask.
I would reiterate that I think we should follow the lead of the chair of whatever board we're talking about in these instances. I agree with Mark in terms of encouraging the chair of the Board of Appeals in this case, that if they feel they need an attorney present, that they have our support, and I think we should probably make a motion of a certain dollar amount to cover that. But I would leave the decision as to whether to spend that money or not up to that board chair.
Well, I'm not, my question wasn't to. Is essentially just for the agreement between our lawyer, that lawyer in the town. As far as what they're covering, what their assignment is as far as. So that when the BOA calls them for information and stuff, they know it's under that contract or whatever.
right.
As far as if they come to the meeting or not, I don't really care either way. Basically, it's up to that board if they want the attorney present. But my main concern was just for the agreement or the contract. Carol.
And so the current contract we have with Natalie, for example, does that have a number not to exceed? How do, you know, so is it just an hourly rate with a maximum number, or is it just an hourly rate? How do you have?
It's an hourly rate. I would have to relook at it to see whether there's a max. To my knowledge, I don't remember there one being, but I can't speak for certain.
My suggestion is for an agreement on the short term here with Mary, that we have an amount not to exceed without prior authorization. That's all. That we would potentially exceed it, but she needs to, you know, we need to hear from them first. So we don't get caught with a $10,000 bill we weren't expecting.
Right.
And
So-
I sign those kind of contracts all the time.
Yeah, well, so that, what I'm saying is our next meeting is not till June. So, and then we need the lawyer by the 25th or sooner because they have questions. So my question is, do we just have the agreement sent to the town administrator, sent to all of us? And individually contact Vika to approve the agreement, and then she would have authorization to sign it. What I'm asking.
I would make a motion that we authorize the town administrator to sign a contract with Mary Costigan's firm in an amount not to exceed $1,500 to be spent on preparation for and attendance of the meeting on May 25th. If the chair of the Board of Appeals indicates that she would like to have such attendance. And that this contract also cover the $500 in question that Vika mentioned earlier.
Okay. Carol?
We need a second. Right? Motion.
Yes.
So once again, we're making a motion out of. I don't have an agenda item. Just, yeah, I just tried to be clear to the public what we're talking about and whatever. Now we brought up a communication or. And I know we've had a lot of communications over in time and this has come up, but. You know,
Can we go back to item B, other business,
mhm.
and then I can make that same motion?
Again, I do apologize, I'm just trying to stay. On the course and clear as possible. The reason we did put the other business, because stuff comes out between that and then to me, this is appropriate to go into other business. And same thing as Mark's, it would have been appropriate to be under other business. So that's all I wanted to say. All right, so we got a motion on the table.
Was it seconded by Carol? No.
So can you repeat your motion? Or can you read it? Yeah, okay, all right.
My motion was that we authorize the town administrator to enter in an agreement not to exceed $1,500 with Mary Costigan's firm to cover the $500 expenditure that was made as authorized without an amount earlier, and also to cover Ms. Costigan's attendance at the May 25th hearing, if the chair of the Board of Appeals would like to have Ms. Costigan present.
To be expended out of where? To be expended out of where?
The legal fund that's already overdrawn.
But then it would have to come, it would have, yeah, I understand.
See,
Can't just-
it can't be, it can't, and no more than five legal ones.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Carol,
I recommend we just make it to provide assistance to the Board of Appeals. I don't think we should make it specific to that hearing. And I would raise the amount to 3,000 and just call it good for the time being, because I think this is gonna keep happening. And I think making it very, we'll be back in the same place that we were, where we made a one-shot commitment and we have to kind of revisit it.
I agree with Carol. I think if you do it, it should be for kind of ongoing services, and the other hearing that she held was. Don't quote me on it, but I want to say it was $3,700 that it cost, because her rate, an hourly rate is almost double what the town attorney's rate is, so it adds up a lot with her, so. It might be more than that.
Would you consider a friendly amendment, Bob?
I would,
So I would
as
amend,
Carol stated.
so I would amend it to say, provide, certain general land use, legal advice to the, whatever it is, legal services to the Board of Appeals as needed, not to exceed $3,000 without prior authorization from, the town.
$3,000?
Yeah, I mean, that's just an arbitrary number, but it's enough to get going.
Jen,
I'll say.
okay, Mark,
No.
okay, Carol,
And the only other thing I would add for Vika's benefit is I do think there needs to be good communication between the chair of the board and Vika about what's happening on the legal side. So I think any communications from the board chair should always be copied to Vika. Does that make sense?
Jen, did you second that?
No.
Mark seconded it.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Do you want me to reach out to Board of Adjustment and Appeals Chair first to see if this is an interest before I reach out to the attorney? Or to reach out to the attorney, have them draft this up and then ask the chair?
I would,
Because if the chair says.
I'd reach out to the attorney. I think that the board needs help.
I'm contrary, I would reach out to the board chair first and let her know. Let her know what we talked about. Basically, she's there as a resource. And we're allowing this, and we want to get into a contract. So, Carol,
The contracts between the board of the town, the board of selectmen and the legal firm.
Mhm.
We're providing those services. They're available to the Board of Appeals. I think they don't need to be involved in that part of the conversation, in my mind. It's an agreement between the town of Shabik and Bernston Board. And after that, it's a conversation about what's available to them and how to use it in coordination with VICA, in my mind.
what if it comes back, they don't want to use that lawyer?
I don't think that, I don't think that's a problem, and I think it's up to us as a board of selectmen to select the attorney we think is appropriate, and I think that's the right one, even though they're expensive. Personally.
Bob,
I do be both at the same time. Start the conversation with
Yeah,
Bernstein
that's
Schuler and also let Sam know that it's there to help her if she needs it. When she needs it. Just keep going. It's not one before the other, it's both at the same.
That's
all right. So there's a motion on the table. Any other discussion?
We voted on the, are we voting on the amended motion?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All right. Any comments from the public? All right, all in favor? All right. Oops, any other communication?
Quite a few. So the email from Archipelago, the town attorney, which was forwarded to you. It is, the attorney who's representing, the owners of 2 Royal Road, which the most, recent appeal is against. I know this conversation stemmed from this. I don't know if you want me to touch base anymore on this communication. You all received it. Okay. CTC and the in meeting, got that one covered. John Wilson sent out an email to a number of different people, with my understanding from having spoken with him, you've all received it. I told him that I would share it, under communications. The planning board is working on rewriting all of this zoning and subdivision ordinance. And they are strongly recommending input from other individuals. They're starting out by contacting different town officials and members of all the different public, of all of the different boards, and seeking input. And so the more people can provide feedback about that, the more helpful it would be for them. But he did say that it was shared with a number of different people. So we received, I received an email from a code enforcement officer, which was just an FYI. The DEP was called on for the purpose of dusting the roads. So somebody called DEP when Public Works was dusting the roads, and emission source, it was a complaint about road dust. Yes,
What do you mean by dusting the roads? You mean sweeping the roads?
they were, so they've
Use a
been
blower.
using kind of a makeshift setup where they've been dusting the roads. And there was a complaint to DEP made about the level of dust that was created in the air. So DEP suggested that all of that work to be stopped, and provided a couple of questions, follow-up questions. So I asked Chuck, when one of them is, what is the current method of removing the sand? How long does it take? Do you have other options? And so we just provided information that, currently this, what is being used July 1st, and the tractor's being purchased, which is gonna have a different system that's gonna help. But in the meantime, it was asked that they not continue that, so I think they did most of the roads. But with this complaint, we can't really finish with the process that we were doing, so. And, so received an email from, Jim Fowler, which I am, considering it a FOA request, and the request is for any, home occupancy permits or special land use permits that have been issued, from 2007, to now. And I asked for specifics of which properties. He came in yesterday and he gave a list of, I believe it was 4 or 5 properties. And so, Chris is keeping track of her time, and we're gonna, once we provide that information, then we will, you know, charge for the time and for the copying of that, but, that's just kind of, you know, for your knowledge, will probably come to an agenda item at some point with whatever comes out of it, so. And let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah. The last communication I have is, it's a communication that I've had with the executive director from JP Cog. And she has, personally asked me if I would be on the executive directors committee as a representative of a small community, small coastal island community. It was promised that it's one meeting a month, an hour or 2 of my time, and so, the purpose of it is for policy implementation, you know, through JP Cog, and I said I would do it. I think it would be a good opportunity for the town to participate with JP Cog and have a foot in that, just to utilize more resources and get to know, you know, some other ideas of what could be helpful for us. So
Are they meeting remotely?
they meet remotely, and there's nothing at this point for me to do until the fall, and she said it's 1 meeting a month, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to have Shabik represent. So I said I would do it. And that's all I have.
All right. I've got a motion to approve the minutes for May 7th, 2023.
So moved.
Second. Any comments on that? All right, all in favor? Items to be placed on future agenda.
I've got 2. One would be, for out in the fall to close the Indian Island road agreement that exists in a formal fashion. And the second would be a more timely one, and that would be to discuss the revision of the code officer job description. Code enforcement job description, I should say. And that's in light with our change to the budget. We need to bring the job description up to speed with what some of our assumptions were when we were changing the budget.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, so I think, I don't know whether it would be an agenda item or a workshop format, but I think we should follow up and have a meeting with the rec center. About kind of the application of the town funds, and we have a existing MOU that's been signed by the board of selectmen, some of you guys, and also some of their current people, but we haven't been following it. So I feel like we need some better control or awareness of how the money is being used. So I think it's time to revisit our financial relationship with them.
Would it be full? Would you recommend the full board?
Yeah, and I
With
would
their
recommend
board?
their board. I mean, I don't know if it has to be the whole board, but I think it's, personally, I prefer it to be the boards.
So do
Rather
you
than-
see it as a workshop?
Probably a workshop is probably what we should do, and I don't know if you have the MOU, Vika, if you don't, I can send it to you, but it would obviously distribute that ahead of time. And they, I think, have a separate group working with Kids Place. I mean, it's affiliated but separate, so you'd want to have them there also. And it's not urgent. I just think it's something that we probably have thought about, you know, we just. If we approve this budget with that allocation, then I think we need to follow up in the next month or two with a meeting with them.
All right,
That sounds reasonable.
so you want to place that after town meeting?
Probably better after town meeting, just because we don't need more things to do right now.
Right.
Okay. All right, anything else?
Well,
Oh,
the other thing I want to put on the agenda, because it's gonna force us to follow up, is with the DOT on the Cousins Island lot. Because, I think we gotta rattle his cage and get him down here. And particularly, well, we're also dealing with that wharf issue, so I kind of wanna just put that on the agenda, and in the next month, we should hopefully meet with him.
can you send an email to Matt Tupper about the wharf? Let him know about some planks too that are popping up.
Yeah.
Please,
It is pretty bad.
yeah. I know that one guy was ill or something, but
Yeah. If I may.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too fussy, but, and I know Nat and his engineers will already know that, but if they place concrete down in that washed out area down low, below the pavement, it should be salt water tolerant mix, not just regular concrete. It won't hold up.
Sheriff,
Well, this isn't really an agenda item, but I just want to say, having taken the skip over regularly. There's been an improvement at Cousins Island in terms of the number of non-resident boats that are in the way, so it's improved. And I think Gennaro apparently posted something,
He did.
it's helping.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to have a good, yeah, pass it on. It was, you know, it's an improvement to a difficult situation.
all right, Jack,
Three things that I want to keep. Top to Long Island on our radar, so that doesn't get there. The last time they were gonna talk with. Kevin Joyce. So I think we should follow up with them. And then I think it's important that we also plan, schedule a Board of Select retreat for the upcoming new board that will be in place after July. That's not necessarily an agenda item, but I think that we just need to make sure we do that.
I don't know if it's called a retreat or
Well,
make it a workshop.
it, you know, the goals and.
No,
and
exactly.
things that The school committee used to do it quite
Yeah.
frequently, and it
Great.
would be really helpful.
Agreed.
All right, Kara,
And to that end, I think, Bob and I asked when we became Board of Selectmen members what we should read, or was there an welcoming packet? And I think we need something, because like, we didn't even know where the policies were. There were policies I didn't know existed, so in my free time, I'll see if I can at least come up with sort of an introduction, because I think depending on how familiar people are with town stuff, it's not obvious what you need to know. I wish I had done some things ahead of time. And the school board does do that, and it's helpful. Like even just access to the main municipal site and registering and understanding all the information that you can access there.
all right, anything else?
I just have one. I know we put it on the agenda before, but I think it would be helpful to have the communication policy back on the agenda, because I try my best to follow what my requirements are off of that, and you have, you know, other expectations of what you feel like I need to forward you, and they don't always match, so it would be helpful for me if I had a little bit better outline of what your expectations are, which ones you want forwarded and so forth, so I think that would be
Pretty good.
beneficial.
Good idea.
And a clarification, the meeting that you were supposed to attend was the joint Long Island meeting with the Cumberland County Sheriff, Long Island, and myself, which is next Thursday at 2 p.m. But you're still welcome to come to the CTC meeting tomorrow. I just totally realized
So
there are two.
I wasn't completely on cloud nine. I did not agree to a meeting tomorrow.
So,
Well, you
what
didn't
you agreed, you agreed was to, you wanted to participate with the Cumberland County Sheriff's
I remember
Department.
that
Yes, and that's next Thursday at 2 p.m.
So you don't need me tomorrow.
You're welcome to come, but no, I don't believe so.
I have another appointment. I was gonna have to read.
That was my confusion, and Thursday was an
A
afternoon.
little too much going on these days. Thank you for that clarification.
One thing to discuss also is gonna be, the budget committee.
Yeah.
If you guys want to hire a budget committee, I think the works need to start.
Well, we don't need, do we have to pass an ordinance? I mean, do you have to do something at town meeting on that?
Not sure.
So just for,
It would be a committee, subcommittee.
just for full transparency, I was planning to get together with Herb Main and probably Carol White and one or both of them and start talking about bringing some information and recommendations back for the group to start talking about after town meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
But good point, though. Did you need to get rolling on that?
Yeah.
I've looked at some smaller towns to see what they do, and the few that I've looked at that have committees, there was one that I was looking at. The Board of Selectmen appointed up to 10 people, which I don't know if you need that many, and it was for a 1-year term. So the term starts July 1st and ends July 30th, so then they work through that budget, so that's something.
I think like 3. And a lot
But
of,
yeah, I mean, but just do like a term where you appoint them and.
Yeah, the thing that scares me about a 1-year term is you just begin to figure out what you need to do and then
well,
you're.
they can get reappointed.
Oh, yeah, okay.
There, you can also do a warrant article where it could be a vote, so the town vote on that, so there's different
Lots
options.
of ways.
I think keep it simple.
And then the extent that the board wants, you know, what kind of information you're looking from them, you know. So,
I think.
Knowing Herb like I know him, there will be very thorough recommendations.
And knowing him like I know him, I'll disagree.
Motion to adjourn.
all right.
And I'll be in the middle, so I'll step over there.
Bring on
All right.
Wilson if it gets really rugged.
Right.
Wilson.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
39 seconds. So, all in favor?
And I think you do. That's. I think you.
All right, paper call.
Was there another packet piece?
And I think you don't. That's okay. Yeah. Budget committee.